Well, welcome to this thought for the day for the 13th of May 2020. We are rounding off our little trilogy on the mystical life, or it might be 4 sessions actually. Yeah, 4 sections, but we've been through the purgative stage, the illumination stage, and now we're looking at the unitive stage or the union stage. So each of these stages basically, we move between them. So they're not as if you get to one place and you have no need for the earlier progression. We each have times when we need to refresh ourselves and reconnect with our need for God. But the hope is that as we journey in life, we spend more time in these deeper stages of spiritual and Christian maturity. Now, for most of us, and definitely me, perhaps the best aim we can hope for is that we can spend most of our time in the illumination stage of the mystical life, where we have that real understanding of God's love for us, and that He is one of these. He is there. We know His presence, and we can grow in our Christ-likeness in the sense that we have a deeper compassion for ourselves and for others and for creation, and that we can see that our capacity to forgive others increases and continues to increase throughout our life, so that we can live up to that imperative that Jesus tells us to forgive 70 times 7, to forgive exponentially, and to learn to love in a way that perhaps we hadn't had the capacity to love before, which is a real sign of spiritual maturity and the growth into this illumination phase of the mystical life. And in regards to union, well, union is the hope of the Christian faith. When St. Paul talks about this is the hope we have, the hope we have isn't a hope for heaven, as it were. That's not this destination which the Christian church has sort of suggested is the hope, that everything we do is in order to get our golden ticket to this place called heaven. Well, St. Catherine said, it's heaven all the way to heaven and hell all the way to hell. And in what she's saying there is that actually we understand that actually heaven or hell really isn't a physical place. It's more of a state of mind and attitude and understanding of the world. When you enter into and see the kingdom of heaven, which is near, as Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within you, well then you can start to see heaven all around, even amongst the mire. But when you seek to live in a way that separates you from people and from God, then it can be hell. And heaven really is about connection, and the ultimate connection is that complete union with God. And that's the real promise of the Christian faith, is that either in this world, where I think like St. Paul says again, we see through a glass dimly. So we get glimpses of this union. And some people, some of the great saints that we emulate, were able to live more in that real union with God here on earth than the majority of us. But even the majority of us can get glimpses of that and have moments when, particularly if you're practicing some form of contemplative prayer or meditation, you'll have those moments where you are in complete union with God in the present and at that moment. And those moments can sustain you for a long time. Mother Teresa is reputed to have said that for the last 40 years of her life, she never really felt the presence of God. But those early experiences of complete union with God sustained her in those other years where she just didn't have a sense of that, knowing that God was present, but really wasn't necessarily able to connect in the way that she had in her earlier days. And so therefore, even one of our great saints like Mother Teresa, that connection, that sense of union. And certainly St. Francis had this, perhaps more than many of the saints we emulate and wish to model and use as a model of Christian living, had this ultimate union with God whilst here and walking this earth. And that perhaps was most keenly manifested in the receiving of Christ's wounds, the stigmata, which we will touch on in the next thought for the day. But it's one of those things where when you know that you have touched this and been in this cosmic union with God, it opens your eyes to see that we are in unitive consciousness with all creation. When you see that you are one with God, then you are able to see that you are one with both your brothers and sisters across the world, but also the rest of the created order. Hence, some brother Francis could say to brother sun, sister moon, he understood the unitive connection that Christ flows in and through each one of us and all of creation. And when you live in that unitive consciousness with God, that is heaven itself. And I personally have come to believe that, because none of us really know what happens after death until we're there, that that great promise is that once we leave and embrace sister death and our mortal bodies die, we become completely in union with God. So even if we don't achieve that union here on earth for whatever reason, or even glimpse it here on earth, the great hope of the Christian faith is that in death, in bodily death, we become part of the unity of God, that we are part of Christ's cosmic body, and that's the ultimate that we can ever hope for, is this complete union with the divine, with the living presence, which is God in God's self. We become part of the great I am. So that is the ultimate end of a mystical life. But the wonderful promise is that whether we are able to glimpse that in our own living life or not, we will be able to have that complete union with God in the next life.